There are people who move through life as if they are both the actor and the audience. They sit in a room and talk, laugh, nod, breathe, but a part of them is not actually inside the moment. A part of them is hovering above their shoulder, watching, observing, analyzing, critiquing. They feel like they are performing a version of themselves, instead of simply being themselves. They know what it is like to feel present and absent at the same time. They know what it is like to feel as if their mind is holding a camera that never stops recording. These are the overly self-aware. It starts quietly, almost invisibly. A child becomes aware of how they are seen. Maybe they notice the tone in someone's voice when they speak. Maybe they notice the way an adult reacts before they finish a sentence. Maybe they begin modifying their behavior to stay safe. Maybe they learn that attention can be dangerous, or embarrassing, or unpredictable. They become hyper-aware of themselves, because hyper-awareness becomes a shield, a tool to predict reactions before they happen, a way to shrink the risk of being criticized or rejected. And over time, monitoring becomes automatic. They learn to track the way they walk, speak, smile, sit. They become experts at reading a room, not because they enjoy it, but because they learned early that the room can turn against them without warning. They develop a sense of self that depends on how others see them, not because they want validation, but because they want safety. They do not want to be caught off guard. They do not want to be the target of ridicule. They do not want to be misunderstood. They want control. The overly self-aware person does not simply think about how they appear. They watch themselves appearing. They observe the performance of their own existence, as if they are outside their body looking in. They monitor their expressions to make sure they seem normal. They monitor their tone to make sure they sound pleasant. They monitor their reactions to make sure they do not appear too emotional. They monitor everything because somewhere along the line they learn that people are watching. And when you spend years believing that people are watching you, you begin to watch yourself even more. This constant surveillance becomes exhausting. It is like living with a spotlight that never turns off. Even alone, the overly self-aware person may feel like they are performing. They feel tense when the room is silent because they begin analyzing how they are sitting or how they are breathing. They replay conversations in their mind hours after they ended. They critique their own posture, their own jokes, their own movements. They become their own harshest observer. But here is the dark truth. Over self-awareness is not vanity. It is not confidence. It is not self-obsession. It is a trauma response. It is a result of a nervous system shaped by environments where scrutiny was constant or unpredictable. It is the attempt to stay ahead of danger by preemptively controlling every possible interpretation. It is the mind's way of saying, if I can see myself clearly, no one can hurt me with something I did not already notice. The overly self-aware person knows what it feels like to be embarrassed deeply. They know what it feels like to have their behavior judged harshly. They know what it feels like to make one mistake and carry the memory of it for years. Their mind stores humiliation as if it were danger. And every time they begin to relax, their brain reminds them to stay alert, to stay aware, to watch themselves. And so they live in a state of constant self-monitoring. Imagine trying to speak while also listening to your own voice, as if it belongs to someone else. Imagine trying to enjoy a moment while narrating it in your own mind. Imagine trying to be spontaneous while calculating how each action might be interpreted. Imagine trying to feel present when your mind is always one layer above your body. This is the life of someone who watches themselves living instead of simply living. On the outside, they may seem calm or controlled. People might say they are polite or thoughtful or mature. People might admire their awareness of social dynamics. People might interpret their quietness as shyness or humility. But they do not see the internal exhaustion. They do not see the constant self-critique. They do not see the tension that never leaves their muscles. They do not see the fear that someone is judging them. They do not see the loneliness of living life as an observer instead of a participant. The overly self-aware person feels disconnected from joy. Joy requires presence. Joy requires immersion. Joy requires letting go. But letting go feels dangerous. If they relax their guard, something might go wrong. Someone might see something they did not mean to reveal. Someone might misinterpret their expression. Someone might notice a flaw. So they stay controlled. And in that control, joy slips through their fingers. They also feel disconnected from themselves. Their identity becomes blurry because they spend so much time performing a version of themselves that fits safely into social expectations. They do not know where their real personality begins and where the performance ends. They cannot tell if they are quiet because they are introverted or quiet because speaking exposes them to judgment. They cannot tell if their preferences are genuine or shaped by fear. They cannot tell if their confidence is real or simply well rehearsed. Over time, their life becomes a series of scenes. Scenes they feel obligated to act in. Scenes they critique afterward. Scenes they never fully inhabit. They appear engaged, but inside they feel distant. They appear present, but their mind is floating somewhere else. They appear connected, but they feel like they are watching themselves from behind glass. This creates a unique kind of isolation. People around them think they know them, but they do not. They know the version that was crafted, the version that was monitored, the version that was safe. The real self, the unfiltered self, stays hidden under layers of analysis. Then comes the breaking point. The moment when the overly self-aware person realizes they are not living their life. They are managing it. They are curating it. They are watching it. They are missing it. They feel a sudden grief, a sharp awareness that something precious is slipping away. They think, I am not actually here. I am not experiencing my own life. I am watching myself from the outside and mistaking it for existence. This realization creates a deep ache, a longing for authenticity, a longing to feel at home in their own body, a longing to speak without calculating, a longing to be messy without punishment, a longing to laugh without self-consciousness, a longing to feel alive instead of watched. But the path back to presence is not simple. It requires courage. It requires relearning how to trust the world, how to trust themselves, how to relax without believing danger will follow. The first step is interrupting the inner observer. When they notice themselves monitoring their tone, they gently bring attention back to the moment. When they start replaying earlier conversations, they remind themselves that mistakes are part of being human. When they feel the urge to control how they appear, they choose one small action that is unfiltered, unrehearsed, genuine, small acts of rebellion against their own monitoring system. The next step is returning to the body. Self-awareness lives in the mind, not the body. The body knows how to be present. It feels temperature, pressure, texture, movement. It exists in real time. By focusing on breath, sensation, posture, physical experience, the overly self-aware person slowly learns to inhabit themselves again. Then comes the hardest part: allowing mistakes. For someone whose survival depended on avoiding mistakes, this feels terrifying. But mistakes are where life slips in. Mistakes are where connection forms. Mistakes are where humanity lives. Allowing themselves to be imperfect is the only way to free themselves from the prison of constant observation. And as they practice these small shifts, their life begins to change. They start laughing more freely. They start speaking with less hesitation. They start enjoying moments without narrating them. They start feeling emotions instead of analyzing them. They start trusting that they do not need to watch themselves to stay safe. They start realizing that the world is not watching them as closely as they think. They start feeling alive again. Here is the truth the overly self-aware person needs to hear. You are not meant to be both the character and the camera. You are not meant to study yourself as if your existence needs editing. You are not meant to monitor every part of your being. You are meant to live, to feel, to move freely, to exist without fear. Your hyper-awareness once protected you. It kept you safe when the world was unpredictable, but you are not in that world anymore. You do not need the spotlight inside your mind. You do not need the camera. You do not need to watch yourself. You get to be yourself. And when you finally take off the observer's lens, you may discover something beautiful. Life feels richer. Colors look brighter. Moments last longer. Conversations feel real. Time slows down. The world softens. And for the first time in a long time, you feel present. Not performing, not analyzing, not observing. Present because you are no longer watching your life happen. You are living it.